First, the US paused military aid to Ukraine, then they stopped intelligence sharing. Zelensky has been quick to make a U-turn to try to befriend Trump. And in the meantime, the Russians are trying to make the most of it. They're pushing ahead on the battlefield, ramping up attacks on Kyiv. We'll discuss the strategy and the implications. Over in Washington, reports say Trump's team is trying to dethrone the Ukrainian president. They're engaging with his political rivals in Kyiv. In Europe, yet another emergency summit to figure out their defenses. And the unlikely beneficiaries of Trump's trade wars, Trudeau in Canada, Sheinbaum in Mexico and Sharma in the UK. All of them have seen a boost in their ratings. Also a report in Lesotho, the country that Trump says no one has ever heard about. Why China is boosting its defense spending and what does it mean for India? How India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar was targeted by Khalistanis in London. Why Indian migrants end up being on death row in Arab countries. How Pakistan blew up the Champions Trophy, turning an opportunity into a tragedy. And why North Korea has halted tourism just weeks after reopening. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus says that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will stand trial for crimes against humanity. This is even if she is not present physically. In an interview, Yunus said that Dhaka has asked New Delhi to extradite Hasina, who has been living in India since last August. Sri Lankan police chief being hunted by his own force. The police have now issued a public appeal to locate their fugitive leader, who has been missing since a court ordered his arrest last week. It was over allegations that he had authorized an illegal hotel raid in 2023. This incident had led to the death of an officer. Portugal faces the possibility of early elections over a controversy involving its prime minister. The PM, who took office last year, is mired in a conflict of interest row. He says he's ready for a vote of confidence in Parliament, where he does not have an absolute majority. Ethnic Serb leader Milorad Dodik says that he is not a threat to Bosnia. This comes a day after he banned the country's police and judiciary from his state-led. It has escalated political tensions in the deeply divided Balkan country. Dodik, a Kremlin ally, is set to meet with the Serbian president later today. And forces in South Sudan arrest the country's oil minister and the deputy head of the army. Both are allies of the first vice president. South Sudan is the world's youngest country. In 2018, it ended a 5-year civil war after a power-sharing agreement between the president and his deputy.
You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
We've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
For days, we've been tracking the politics around Ukraine, the meetings, the statements, the power play. It's been a dramatic, action-packed period. But in this time, there have been many developments on the battlefield too. And the outcomes on the talking table have a direct bearing on the front lines. Ukraine is clearly on the back foot. It is getting harder for them to keep fighting because the US is pulling back support. First, the Americans halted military aid, and now they have stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Remember, it was the American support that kept Ukraine in the fight. Without them, Kyiv's defenses could crumble. The Russians see an opening here, and they're moving fast to capitalize. Russia is stepping up attacks on Ukraine. Take a look at this. The Russians struck central Ukraine overnight. The attack killed 2 people. In the last few days, the fighting has escalated significantly. This week alone, Russia has launched more than 180 drones targeting multiple locations across Ukraine. Shelling is happening almost every day. Some of the targets are strategic in nature. Russia claims it has attacked Ukrainian airfields, an oil depot, drone production workshops, and other military assets of Kyiv. These were spread out across 150 districts of Ukraine. It is not clear if these attacks caused major damage, but the scale shows intent. Russia is clearly trying to weaken Ukraine. It wants to expand its battlefield gains. Moscow's calculation is quite simple. Ukraine is losing American support, so this is the best time to take advantage. And this is not speculation, what we are saying here. It comes from the horse's mouth, from a man called Dmitry Medvedev, a close ally of Vladimir Putin and a former president of Russia. Medvedev held the seat for Putin between 2008 and 2012 when the Russian constitution, did not allow Putin to hold a presidential office. That's how deeply trusted Dmitry Medvedev is. Now he serves on Russia's Security Council, and he laid out their battlefield priorities. The orders to Russian forces are simple: inflict maximum damage. That is the brief: inflict maximum damage. Medvedev calls it their primary objective. It is a time-tested strategy. Russia wants to strike when Ukraine is weak and secure more ground before the peace talks. Russia also remains wary of the Americans. It believes that this pause in aid is temporary. It is not a full retreat, and Trump may have stepped back for a while now from Ukraine, but he can easily resume support, both the military aid and the intel. The thinking in Russia is this: they have, and I'm quoting again, they have a limited time frame to make gains on Ukraine. And Trump's team, in fact, is conveying similar messages.
Did the U.S. pause intelligence sharing with Ukraine, and is it still paused right now?
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship. But I just got off the phone before I walked out here with my counterpart, the Ukrainian National Security Advisor. We are having good talks on a location for the next round of negotiations, on delegations, on substance.
So it is a pause, not an end, not yet. They make it sound like it's temporary. But for Ukraine, it poses an existential crisis. If their defenses are weakened, if they're unable to defend against Russian attacks, the losses will go beyond the lives of Ukrainians. The loss of territory could be irreversible. And by the time the American support returns, Ukraine may not have much to defend. Since the beginning of this war, Kyiv has depended on the US, not just for weapons, but also for tactical support. Intelligence sharing was instrumental on this front. But now the US has blocked all intelligence sharing except for what Ukraine's forces need for survival. That's all that they're giving. In the past, their support was pretty wide in scope. A key part of the agreement, or the arrangement rather, was an early warning system. It shielded Ukraine from aerial attacks, including long-range missile and drone attacks from Russia. Ukraine also relied on American intelligence for counterattacks, for them to identify targets inside Russia, especially for long-range strikes. Weapons like the HIMARS depended on this data. HIMARS is a light multiple rocket launcher. Ukraine used this to strike deep inside Russia. Now with the US pulling the support, Kyiv could struggle to identify Russian targets. And this has been a long-standing demand from Russia. The Kremlin has repeatedly insisted on this, for an end to foreign assistance that puts Russian territory at risk. So basically, even without a peace deal, President Donald Trump has given Moscow what it wanted. And Ukraine's chances of a comeback are increasingly looking grim.
Those times
With World War, you're not winning.
in 3 days.
I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want to.
And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long.
no secret that Donald Trump is not a fan of Volodymyr Zelensky. And don't take our word for it, just check out their meeting last Friday. It was the opposite of cordial. They stopped short of punching each other. But is that dislike strong enough for Trump to plot against Zelensky? To maybe oust him from power? Perhaps yes. Take a look at this new report in the US media. It says Trump officials are speaking to Zelensky's rivals in Ukraine. Basically, the Ukrainian opposition parties, Trump's team is talking to them. The goal is to understand their appetite for elections and how they would handle the war. A couple of names have been mentioned in this report. One is Yulia Tymoshenko. She is a former prime minister. She has also run for president twice, in 2014 and then again in 2019. Trump officials are speaking to her. They're also engaging with another party. It's called European Solidarity. That's the name of the party. That's the party of Petro Poroshenko. He was the president of Ukraine from 2014 to 2019. So he was basically Zelensky's predecessor. The US is now talking to him. And how are these camps reacting? Well, in public, they have opposed holding elections. All of them have closed ranks behind Zelensky in public. But behind the scenes, it's a mini Game of Thrones. Reports say Yulia Tymoshenko is on a poaching mission. She's trying to make lawmakers defect to her side. And if she succeeds, she could create a new political bloc in parliament, a bloc that could force Zelensky to quit. Reports also say that some factions are willing to play Trump's game. They're pitching themselves as alternatives, as leaders who would be easier to handle than Zelensky. Of course, these are all unconfirmed reports. For all we know, it's just palace intrigue. So let's keep the speculation aside for the moment. Let's focus on what we know. Has Donald Trump shown interest in ousting Zelensky? The answer is yes. He has called Zelensky an elected dictator. He has also suggested that Zelensky will not be around for long. Listen to this.
Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal.
He won't be around for very long, he says. This was after the White House clash, but before Zelensky's letter to Donald Trump, the letter in which Zelensky promised to sue for peace. So who knows, maybe Trump has softened his position since then, though his allies certainly haven't. The MAGA camp seems to hate the Ukrainian president, and I use the word hate on purpose. One such ally is Steve Bannon. He was a top advisor in Trump's first term. Listen to what he thinks of Zelensky.
Zelensky is untrustworthy. He's a crook and a punk. And he showed what a punk he was in the Oval Office the other day. He should never be allowed back in. I don't think he should ever be allowed back in to the United States.
Some U.S. lawmakers also feel the same, like Senator Lindsey Graham. He too has asked Zelensky to step aside. So the sentiment in the Trump camp is pretty clear. In their ideal world, Zelensky would not be in charge. They would like someone more malleable. And so does Russia, of course. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly demanded Zelensky's ouster. He has called him a toxic figure.
Today's head of the Kyiv regime is becoming a toxic figure for the armed forces of Ukraine because he gives absurd orders dictated not by military considerations, but by political considerations, and it is unclear what these are based on.
Which raises another question. Can Zelensky be ousted? He says he will only resign in exchange for a NATO membership, which is another way of saying, I won't resign. Technically, he can't be forced either, because Ukraine is under martial law, and under martial law, elections are suspended. But let's assume that Trump or Putin have their way, and that Zelensky agrees to hold fresh elections. What would happen then if elections are held in Ukraine? Let's look at the presidential opinion polls. 44% people in Ukraine still support Zelensky. 44%. At second place is an independent leader. His name is Valery Zaluzny, and he's got 21% support. Petro Poroshenko is at 10%, and Yulia Tymoshenko is at 6%. Zelensky may not be as popular as he was in 2022 or 2023, but he is still the preferred choice in Ukraine. So if elections are held in perfect conditions, he will win. Again, I said perfect conditions on purpose because any election now will not be perfect. A lot of Ukrainians are on the front lines. Millions of them have been living as refugees in neighboring countries. So the results may not mirror the opinion polls. Plus, there's risk of meddling. It is clear that Trump does not want Zelensky around. It's also clear that Putin thinks the same. That's two big players openly undermining the incumbent. So the polls may not be free, fair or perfect. A better option is for Zelensky to change his position. His people have backed his resistance to Russia, but now there is fatigue. Nearly 2/3 of all Ukrainians prefer talks or war. Zelensky should listen to them. If not, he could lose both his country and his seat.
Europe faces a clear and present danger, and therefore Europe has to be able to protect itself, to defend itself, as we have to put Ukraine in a position to protect itself and to push for a lasting and just peace.
Leaders of the European Union have gathered in Brussels. They're having another summit to discuss the future of European security and the fate of Ukraine. Now, you may think you've seen this before. After all, they've had a number of meetings already in the last few days. There was this summit in London on Sunday, when most of the same people showed up again to talk about Ukraine security. But today's summit is slightly different. Slightly. Today is just about the EU. No Britain, no Canada, just the European Union. And I mean all of the EU, including the leaders who are against aid to Ukraine. You have Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico. They are in Brussels too. They are already making demands before the summit. They were making demands before the summit, threatening to derail the talks. But the other leaders seem determined to push forward.
We have to take decisions. No matter are there one or two countries which are opposing every time. And we have to look for possibilities to implement decisions, because otherwise the history will penalize us, and we will pay very high cost for this inability to take these decisions.
But what exactly are they going to decide on? What is their plan? Well, one part is about security guarantees for Ukraine. The other is increasing European defense. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has a plan. She unveiled it on Tuesday. It is called the Rearm Europe Plan. Rearm Europe. It calls for the mobilization of 800 billion euros over the course of 4 years.
I present today to the leaders the Rearm Europe Plan. The Rearm Europe Plan provides up to 800 billion euros for defense investment. It gives the member states fiscal space to invest in defense. It gives the member states possibility to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry or to procure military capabilities that go right away to Ukraine.
So basically the EU is hand-wringing about budgets. Von der Leyen's plan will allow EU nations to spend more money than they make. Presently, there's a limit on an EU member's budget deficit, on how much budget deficit you can have as a member of the European Union. But this limit will be increased if they spend money on defense. Ursula von der Leyen says that this could unlock 650 billion euros in public funding, provided that every EU member bothers to do this. 650 billion. The remaining 150 billion euros will be in the form of loans. Von der Leyen wants to create a new financial instrument to encourage European Union members to buy weapons together. And this makes sense. Think about it like buying wholesale. The more you buy at once, the more you save. So the new Rearm Europe plan hopes to incentivize bulk defense purchases and force EU members to work together. Let's see if they can manage that. But this isn't the only purpose of today's meeting. Some EU members want to discuss an offer made by French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday.
Our nuclear dissuasion protects us. It is complete, sovereign, fully French. Since 1964, it has always explicitly played a role in the preservation of peace and security in Europe. But answering to the historic call of the future German Chancellor, I decided to open the strategic debate on the protection through our dissuasion of our allies in the European continent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the French president.
Macron says he wants to open a debate about extending the French nuclear umbrella. It's a radical idea, to say the least. France could eventually commit to protecting foreign nations with its nukes. That would be an extremely generous offer. It has definitely intrigued some EU members.
We have to treat this proposal seriously because it must be one of our priorities to coordinate all our capacities in Europe and to build, in fact, one well-coordinated military power. This is what can give us a clear advantage towards Russia. And of course, as always, details matter, but this readiness of France, this is something very promising.
Now, let's be clear, this is just talk, and honestly, there is no way that Russia would allow this. But the fact that Macron even made the offer is noteworthy. It shows that the cracks are deeper than ever before. Europe is scared, and they are considering desperate actions. Winning an election is a challenge. Staying popular, an even bigger challenge. World leaders have always struggled with this, balancing policy, economy, and a bit of political theatre. It is tough. But now there's a new formula for popularity, and it is quite simple. Just stand up to Donald Trump, challenge the US president head-on, spar with him directly or indirectly, and just like that, your approval ratings will climb. Look at Justin Trudeau. Not long ago, the Canadian Prime Minister was a political liability. His approval ratings were in free fall. His party was 26 points behind in the polls. The Liberals were sinking fast. So Trudeau did the only thing left to do. He resigned as Prime Minister. It was a last-ditch attempt to save his party. Even that did not work. But soon, fate handed him an unexpected lifeline. Donald Trump. The US president mocked Canada. He kept calling it the 51st American state. He suggested that Canadians should join America. He slapped tariffs on the country, and just like that, anger erupted.
And I can tell you that every country is very, very aware that if the American government is willing to do this to their own closest ally, neighbor, and friend, everyone is vulnerable to a trade war.
This, in turn, helped the Liberals. The Liberals are Justin Trudeau's party. For the first time since 2021, they're leading in the polls. The Liberals are at 38%. The Conservatives are trailing at 36%. So it seems to be quite the resurgence. And even Donald Trump has realized it. He says Justin Trudeau is using this issue to stay on in power. In fact, let me quote from his post. This is what Trump has said. Trudeau was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like, what's going on here? I then realized that he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. And this is not a unique case, what's happening in Canada. America's southern neighbor is experiencing something similar. I'm talking about Mexico. Trump imposed similar tariffs on Mexico too. 25% tariffs on Mexican goods coming to the US. Now remember, over 80% of Mexico's exports go to America, so these tariffs spell disaster for Mexico's economy. Technically, this should sink a leader, but not Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Her disapproval ratings are only soaring. They're up by 15 points since last year. Guess nothing rallies a country like perceived victimhood, especially at the hands of an external antagonist. And Donald Trump is playing that role to perfection. For Mexicans, Sheinbaum is a defiant leader. She's standing up to an unreasonable American bully, and that has boosted her political fortunes.
It is in no way nor the purpose to initiate an economic or commercial confrontation, which unfortunately and regrettably is the opposite of what we should be doing. That is to say, to better integrate our economies to strengthen our region in the face of the economic and commercial advancement of other regions.
So Trudeau and Sheinbaum are soaring on the charts. Across the pond, another leader is reaping similar benefits. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, until now he had a political headache. His biggest challenge was how to look interesting. But like Trudeau, Starmer too stumbled upon the greatest political rebrand, standing up to Donald Trump. And see the ratings go up. Look at this new YouGov poll from Wednesday. Keir Starmer's ratings are at a 6-month high. In February, it was around 26%. Now it is up to 31%. And the boost came from his recent political activity. Starmer flew to Washington. He met the US president. He put forth his point firmly and cordially. Then he returned and embraced Ukrainian President Zelensky. He got Europe together for an emergency summit. And suddenly, Keir Starmer is no more the uninspiring leader. He is the face of Western resolve, especially against the forces of chaos.
The question of responsibility, I do think the United Kingdom should step up and lead. We have done that historically as a nation, and we need to do it again. And that is why we're moving forward on this.
The lesson here is clear. If you cannot be charismatic, at least be the guy who's reminding people that other options can be much worse. And honestly, this phenomenon is not new. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel saw a similar bump a few years back. The Trump factor boosted her re-election chances. Same for Emmanuel Macron. The bold handshake power play helped the French president. And now we are seeing more examples. Trudeau is riding a wave of nationalistic pride. Claudia Sheinbaum has seen her approval soar, and Keir Starmer has suddenly become a symbol of Western unity. The pattern is clear. When Donald Trump picks a fight, his opponents benefit, if not the countries, at least their leaders. It is not about policy or charisma. It is about the contrast they present. In a world where politics is often about choosing the least worst option, that contrast can take you a long way.
Засади рятувальників наразі ліквідовують наслідки. Медики, поліція, всі оперативні служби на місцях ліквідовуємо, допомагаємо. Намагаємось максимально оперативно ліквідувати усі пожежі. Уся інформація буде згодом щодо наслідків, щодо постраждалих. Ми працюємо.
Перемещались. Я вас У меня аж дом задрожал и упали вещи. И я боялся и под диван упал. И испугался, под диван залез и сидел, пока все это не перестанется. Я орал на весь дом. Папа меня успокоил, но я все равно той ночью не мог заснуть, целую ночь сидел. И что-то еще все равно стреляло. Я боялся, спрятался под диваном, пытался заснуть. И еще был у меня братик, он тоже испугался, и он тоже плакал. И я не мог ничего сделать, и я просто быстро пытался заснуть. И сейчас мы сидим без света, и у нас все электрическое, мы не можем покушать. У нас все и мой брат младший, он тоже не может покушать. И еще мама уехала на войну, и папа. Папа мне помог, чтобы я не боялся.
Мы просто 6 можем, сколько? 4? 4 на забор. Ира, надо попросить у кого-то тачку.
Now let's turn our attention to Lesotho, the African country nobody has ever heard of. And we are not the ones saying this, Donald Trump did. When he addressed the US Congress earlier this week, he said nobody has ever heard of this country that Washington is sending money to. Unsurprisingly, Lesotho's government is shocked and embarrassed. That's how they put it, shocked and embarrassed. And the people of Lesotho are schooling Trump on social media, claiming that they are not his punchline. And we are here to do our part. Our next report tells Donald Trump and the world things about Lesotho you should have heard of.
When Donald Trump addressed the US Congress with his 1 hour and 40-minute long monologue, replete with familiar exaggerations, a lot of points stood out. But one offhanded comment particularly hit a nerve.
Just listen to some of the appalling waste we have already identified. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of.
Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. That's what Donald Trump, the President of the United States and arguably the most powerful leader in the world, said about another sovereign nation. This in his first speech since his return to the Oval Office. This cheeky remark came as he listed the cuts made to so-called wasteful expenditure.
Ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars.
It elicited laughter from some US lawmakers, but many people are not indulging in this celebration of ignorance, including the Basotho. That's what people from Lesotho are called. Now, of course, we don't expect Donald Trump to know that, but his comments have obviously angered Lesotho residents.
President Trump saying he's never heard of us, well, that doesn't make sense to me because the US has an embassy here in Maseru, and to me that says there's relations between the two nations.
People are taking to social media, sharing facts about Lesotho, saying that, of course, he's too busy golfing to notice, when apparently many of the t-shirts he loves are made in the country he barely knows about. Their government echoes a similar sentiment. According to reports, Lesotho's Foreign Affairs Minister, Lejeune Mpotjoane, was shocked and embarrassed by the comments. He has vowed that Lesotho is not taking this matter lightly. The country will also send an official protest letter to Washington and would be happy to invite the president as well as the rest of the world to come to Lesotho. But let's start small. Here are some things Donald Trump and the world should know about the country. Let's start with a quick geography lesson. Lesotho is a small mountainous country in southern Africa. It's completely surrounded by South Africa. Not much of its land is available for farming. So its 2.3 million people are vulnerable to food shortages. Lesotho is a $2.1 billion economy and its people often rely on jobs in South Africa. Despite its small size of only 30,000 square kilometers, Lesotho is home to fascinating wonders. And we're not just talking about one of the world's largest dinosaur footprints here. Lesotho is called the Kingdom in the Sky. It is mostly made up of highlands. This is the only country in the world that lies about 1,000 meters in elevation. Its lowest point is at 1,400 meters, and it's home to one of the scariest airstrips to land on, which has a short runway of 400 meters at a height of about 2,300 meters. Now, resources may be scarce in the country due to its harsh environment. But Lesotho is rich in water, often called white gold, as well as diamonds, which are a major export for the nation. What Donald Trump should also know is this. Lesotho has the second highest level of HIV infection in the world. Almost 1 in 4 adults is HIV positive. Now, Trump may say that Lesotho gets $8 million to promote LGBTQI+, but local advocacy groups refute it. In fact, much of the US aid money goes towards HIV prevention in the nation. Slashing it has sparked fears of the disease's resurgence. While Trump may not care about Lesotho, two people certainly do. First, Britain's unnecessary prince, Harry. Like the UK, Lesotho is a constitutional monarchy. Harry is close friends with the brother of their current king and visits the country often. Another person who can definitely point Lesotho on the map is President Xi Jinping. Because China, Washington's main rival for influence in Africa, has built much of the country's infrastructure. Plus, Chinese businesses have long been present in the country, making Lesotho the largest sub-Saharan African exporter of garments to the United States, with goods worth $240 million. That sounds like something the President of the US should know about. According to him, Lesotho may be the country that nobody has ever heard of. But thanks to him, everyone is talking about it now.
Now let's talk about China. It has announced its defense budget for the year, a staggering $245 billion, $245 billion, an increase of around 7% from last year. This cements China's position in the global pecking order. It remains the world's second largest military spender after the United States. It's right behind the US, in fact. But the real story here goes beyond the numbers. The $245 billion budget is a reflection of China's ambitions. And India should be paying attention to this. Look at how things stand at the moment. China remains gripped by an economic crisis. Growth has plummeted. New challenges are on the horizon. US President Donald Trump is punishing Chinese products. He has launched a trade war against Beijing, but instead of dealing with these economic challenges, China is ramping up its defense spending. It already has the world's biggest navy, and now China is steadily building up its weapons arsenal. It is acquiring advanced missile systems, fighter jets, and maritime vessels. China doesn't want to slow down progress on these fronts. It is prioritizing military upgrades over economic recovery. Consider this. China's growth target remains unchanged. It is aiming for 5% growth in 2025. That's the same as last year. But the defense spending gets a 7% increase. That extra money could have been used to ease the property crisis or to improve the domestic demand or create more jobs or maybe even pay off some of China's debt. But despite the obvious economic problems, they've not only not slashed the military budget, they have in fact increased it. And look at the timing. In recent months, Chinese troops have been busy. They have ramped up operations at various flashpoints. The PLA is building pressure on Taiwan with military drills and repeated incursions. In the South China Sea, Beijing is asserting its dominance. Clashes with troops from the Philippines have escalated. Their coast guards have even come to blows. Taipei has sounded an alarm. It believes the threat from China is growing. So this bigger military budget only means new security risks. In response, Taiwan is increasing its own defense spending. It wants to build stronger deterrence against China.
In the face of the rapidly changing international situation and the escalating threats from adversaries, we cannot rely on the goodwill of others for peace. Peace through strength is the only way to achieve true peace.
Taiwan's military budget is around 17 billion for this year. It's a fraction of what China spends. Taipei will never be able to match that. Today, Taiwan spends around 2% of its GDP on defense. The plan is to increase it to 3%, perhaps even more. India faces a similar challenge. What is India's defense budget? $79 billion for this year. 79 billion, which is about 2.3% of India's GDP. China's defense budget is 3 times bigger. And with the PLA's ballooning budget, this gap could widen in the coming years. So India needs strong deterrence against China. It must keep pace with China's military modernization and its new capabilities. Defense, in fact, gets the highest allocation in India's budget. But funding for new acquisitions often falls short. This year, too, it saw a meager hike, around 4%. The procurement budget stood at 1.8 trillion rupees. In contrast, the Defense Ministry spends 4.7 trillion rupees on just manpower, on salaries and pensions, etc. So bigger procurement is the need of the hour. As China doubles down on military spending, India will have to prepare for the growing risk. Frankly, there is no other option. Now let's turn to the UK. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is there. He is on a long 6-day trip to the UK and Ireland. And yesterday he had a scary encounter. S. Jaishankar was at the Chatham House in London. It's a very old British think tank. The minister spoke to them for more than 1 hour. Meanwhile, outside, a crowd was building up, a crowd of rowdy Khalistanis. As the minister was leaving the building, one of them rushed to his car. He was shouting Khalistani slogans and he was tearing up the Indian flag. Look at this. This is a serious security breach. You have dozens of protesters with Khalistani flags. They are right across the road from Jaishankar's car, perhaps 30 to 40 meters. That's it. And they did not appear magically there. They began gathering when Minister Jaishankar arrived, so the cops had plenty of time to secure the area. Yet what did they do? Put up a flimsy barricade to hold them in. And look at the man who charged at the minister's car. He wasn't even behind the barricade. He had a free run straight to the car. Thankfully, Minister Jaishankar was already inside the vehicle and the security officials pulled the man back. But this incident could have ended very differently, which is why New Delhi is outraged. Let me quote from their statement. We condemn the provocative activities of this small group of separatists and extremists. We deplore the misuse of democratic freedoms by such elements. We expect the host government in such cases to fully live up to their diplomatic obligations. This is a strong statement by India. New Delhi has also summoned Britain's Deputy High Commissioner here. A protest has been lodged over the breach. And how is the UK responding? Well, they have called this incident completely unacceptable. They're saying public events should not be threatened or disrupted. Well, we agree. But then why did they not prevent it? Why weren't they alert? And this was not some random incident. This happened because the UK ignored red flags. The first was the crowd outside Chatham House. It was a clear indication that something was brewing. The second red flag is the precedent. Because this was not an isolated incident. Khalistanis have repeatedly targeted Indian missions in the UK. In January, they ganged up outside the High Commission in London. Back in 2023, they actually attacked it. They attacked the Indian High Commission. The Indian flag was desecrated. The High Commission's property was destroyed and our officials were hurt. So you have a long history of Khalistani violence in London. You have a Khalistani crowd near the Indian minister's motorcade. Yet what is your plan of action? A tiny barricade. Frankly, this is becoming absurd. You talk about signing a free trade deal with India. You say you want to supercharge India ties, yet you risk the security of India's top diplomat. This is completely unacceptable, and we get the whole freedom of expression argument. We are a democracy too, but we don't allow mobs to endanger visiting leaders. Think back to all the recent trips. Donald Trump had a roadshow in Ahmedabad, no incident. Emmanuel Macron had a meet and greet in Jaipur. He was openly mingling with the locals. Again, no incident. Anthony Albanese took a lap of a cricket stadium. No incident. Britain's former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was here last month. He was touring the Taj Mahal like a normal visitor. Again, no incident. If India can protect visiting leaders, why can't Britain? Because the problem there is systemic. Because Britain does not see Khalistanis as a security threat. They see them, or they see this, as an issue of freedom. Or perhaps a pressure point against India. Unless that changes, such incidents will keep happening, and we hope London is listening because we know that they are very keen to build ties with India. The UK's Foreign Secretary hosted Minister Jaishankar at his country residence. It's called Chevening House. He also had a meeting with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. So clearly London is going the extra mile, but we say forget the extra mile. Do the bare minimum first. Crack down on elements threatening India's integrity. Secure our diplomats and visiting officials. That is the first step to meaningful relations. Not complicated trade deals or working retreats, but mutual respect and safety. And now on to West Asia, where 3 Indians have been executed in just 1 week. 2 men and 1 woman. These were migrant workers in the UAE. All of them were charged with murder and swiftly handed the death sentence. And this is not a first. According to official data, 54 Indians face the death sentence in foreign countries. 46 of them are in West Asia, including Nimisha Priya, a nurse in Yemen who is on the death row. Why are so many Indians meeting this fate in the Gulf? And is there a way out? Our next report tells you.
Nimisha Priya was just 19 when she left everything behind and set foot in Yemen. A young, aspiring nurse from Kerala was looking for a better future. She toiled for years in a government hospital, earning barely enough to survive. But she dreamed of something more. So she took a risk and opened her own clinic with a Yemeni business partner, Mehdi. For a while, it seemed like a new beginning, until everything turned into a nightmare. Mehdi allegedly became her tormentor, abusing her, controlling her every move. He took away her passport, her belongings, her freedom. And then, in 2017, Mehdi was found dead. The police charged Nimisha with murder. They said she killed him with an overdose of sedatives. Nimisha fought back, denying everything. But in 2020, she was given a death sentence. Her family tried to fight back. The Indian government offered all the assistance they could. But right now, time is running out to save her. Sadly, Nimisha isn't the only one. 2 Indians were executed in the UAE on the 28th of February. Mohammad Rinash and Murlidharan Perumthata. According to reports, Rinash was accused of killing an Emirati national. Murlidharan was sentenced for killing an Indian. This comes after another Indian woman, Shehzadi Khan, was executed in Abu Dhabi. She worked as a domestic helper. According to court documents, Shehzadi allegedly killed her employer's baby. That makes it 3 executions within just 1 week. Currently, 54 Indians are facing death sentences in foreign countries. Most are in West Asia. 29 of them are in the UAE, 12 of them in Saudi Arabia, 3 in Kuwait, 1 in Qatar, and 1 in Yemen. Also, Saudi Arabia has the highest number of Indian prisoners at 2,633 Indian prisoners. The UAE has the second highest with 2,518 prisoners. Why do so many Indians end up on death row in the Gulf? Every year, thousands leave for West Asia, dreaming of a better life, higher wages, a chance to lift their families out of poverty. But reality hits hard. Visa sponsors seize their passports. Wages are delayed or denied. They endure exploitation, abuse, and inhumane conditions. Desperation drives many to the edge, and sometimes to crimes they never imagined. Once arrested, the odds are stacked against them. No legal aid, no financial support, no way out. And under the Islamic Sharia system, death sentences are frequent, especially for foreigners. But change is happening. In recent years, diplomatic pressure and intervention have brought hope and a fighting chance for those trapped in this nightmare. But for many, help often comes too late. Families wait in agony, hoping for a miracle, hoping for a last-minute intervention, hoping that their loved ones won't become just another name on a list. Some find reprieve through diplomatic negotiations. Some cling to the hope of blood money settlements. But for others, the gallows become their final destination. The price of justice is a luxury they cannot afford.
Our next story is about Pakistan, about Pakistani cricket. The country has exited the Champions Trophy, and I'm not talking about the cricket team here. The team was out ages ago. Now the country itself has got eliminated, despite technically being the hosts. As you would know, the Champions Trophy final will be played on Sunday, but the host nation, Pakistan, will not be hosting. Why? Because India is in the final, and a deal was struck before the tournament. The Indian cricket team would not be stepping foot in Pakistan. All of India's matches would be played at a neutral venue at the International Cricket Stadium in Dubai. That's how it has been for the entire tournament. India defeated Australia during the semi-final on Tuesday, so the final will be held in Dubai, effectively eliminating Pakistan's hosting duties. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this arrangement, a lot of criticism directed at India, but the arrangement works both ways. The Pakistani cricket team will also not be travelling to India for the tournaments being held over the next 3 years. That was the deal. So eventually, the shoe will be on the other foot if Pakistan ever reaches a final, that is. Their recent performance does not inspire confidence, though. You see, despite being the host nation, Pakistan ended up at the bottom of their group with 2 losses and a washout. They finished dead last because of their abysmal net run rate. It was the worst possible way to mark their return to the big leagues. And this tournament was supposed to be about Pakistan's grand comeback. The country was hosting a major ICC tournament after 29 long years. The last one that they hosted was way back in 1996, the 1996 World Cup. They co-hosted that with India and Sri Lanka. It took Pakistan 29 years to get another shot. And a solo won this time. So the country went all out. The Pakistan Cricket Board, or PCB, spent millions. And we're talking US dollars here. Millions of dollars. In Pakistani rupees, the cost was in billions. Now, technically, the spending was justified. It was a major tournament after all, so stadiums had to be renovated. Pakistan spent $16 million doing that. And they're due to receive some of that money back, about $6 million in hosting fees. So overall, let's say that they spent $10 million upgrading 3 stadiums. It sounds okay until you see what that money actually brought. Flooded stands, leaked ceilings, and most importantly, an unplayable ground. That's what they got for this money, $10 million. The Pakistan-Bangladesh group stage match was a washout. So was Australia-South Africa and then Australia-Afghanistan. Former Indian cricketer Mohammad Kyiv asked the right question: was the money spent wisely? Well, clearly not. Pakistan's 3 stadiums were not up to the mark, and the home team crashed and burned in the group stage before the tournament really picked up. So it is no wonder that we saw this. The stands left absolutely empty. And this was yesterday, by the way, during the second semi-final. New Zealand versus South Africa. It was a stellar match. Both sides scored more than 300 runs, but look at those stands. You wouldn't guess that a high-scoring semi-final was taking place here, would you? Overall, the tournament was a debacle, has been a debacle. Pakistan was given a chance and they blew it. Poor infrastructure, poor arrangements, and a shockingly poor performance. Now it's up to India and New Zealand to salvage the tournament and give it a good send-off this Sunday.
Засади рятувальників наразі ліквідовують наслідки. Медики, поліція, всі оперативні служби на місцях. Ліквідовуємо, допомагаємо. Намагаємось максимально оперативно ліквідувати усі пожежі. Уся інформація буде згодом щодо наслідків, щодо постраждалих. Ми працюємо.
Четыре 10 перемещаться.
У меня аж дом задрожал и упали вещи. И я боялся и под диван упал. И испугался, под диван залез и сидел, пока все это не перестанется. Я орал на весь дом. Папа меня успокоил, но я все равно той ночью не мог заснуть, целую ночь сидел. И что-то еще все равно стреляло. Я боялся, спрятался под диваном, пытался заснуть. И еще был у меня братик, он тоже испугался, и он тоже плакал. И я не мог ничего сделать, и я просто быстро пытался заснуть. И сейчас мы сидим без света, и у нас все электрическое, мы не можем покушать. У нас все и мой брат младший, он тоже не может покушать. И еще мама уехала на войну, и папа. Папа мне помог, чтобы я не боялся.
Мы просто 6 можем, сколько? 4? 4 на забор. Ира, надо попросить у кого-то тачку.
Да, главное нет света и газа нет еще, добавок ко всему. У нас же отопление, ну, частный дом, котел стоит, автономный. Газа нет с ночи. Плита не работает, света нет. Уезжать пока такие.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in on the international front when it comes to Donald Trump's entire tariff conundrum. Now what we're learning is that the US President Donald Trump has announced that the 25% tariffs on Mexico are